welcome to another episode of the HalfTime Roomies. This is your host Yashraj Dhillon, and today's topic of discussion is football. As we all know, all football leagues across the world have been suspended, and as of this recording, the Premier League has been suspended indefinitely. So, keeping in mind the three realistic scenarios that we do have, we'll talk about what happens to the league if it gets either cancelled, which means that we reset the league, go back to last year's standing, or we do a status quo thing, which means that we wrap up the league and teams where they are finish as they are, or we can just bank on suspension, basically suspend the league to a time period where it seems like it's safe enough to resume play. As of this recording, actually, fun fact, the Belarusian league is still in play. And tomorrow's mega match is between Islok and Slutsk. Speaking of sluts, I have the two Sluts brothers with me. Hey. George the Gunner and Thomas the Red Devil.
Also, I prefer the term working girl, okay? Or sexually progressive.
Lady of the night.
Lady of the night.
Lady of the night.
Yes. One thing I know for sure is I get more hair and makeup in my other job.
Yeah. Some bleach as well.
Of the anal variety.
Yes. Thank you for that very underwhelming introduction, King Kong Bundy.
I mean, your team has been very underwhelming, so I mean, the introduction should match the team, right?
Yeah. I'd say let's move on and let's try to cut down the shame for now.
Okay. So moving on, let's start with the first question, which is, which scenario do these guys prefer? So we'll start with you, George. Which scenario of these three do you think suits your team better and why?
So two ways of looking at it. I think in terms of when you said suits my team better, cancellation.
Right.
But also my point of view will be cancellation. I'll start off with why cancellation suits Arsenal better. Mm-hmm. Like in the current scheme of things, when the league stopped before this whole crisis, we were 10 games away.
Yeah.
Arsenal were languishing in 9th. Not that the difference between us and 4th place was that big, but there was too many other teams in the mix.
Yeah.
We had to play Wolves. We would have to play Liverpool. We had to play City, and we had to play Spurs.
Yeah, you guys do have a tough run going in the last 10 games.
And just knowing how tough it would be to take points off those teams.
Yeah.
In a realistic scenario, I did not see us finishing in the top 4. And that being said, to miss out on even the Europa League, forget the Champions League, would be pretty devastating for us. So right. I think in that scenario, it definitely works out well from an Arsenal perspective that we just cancel the season, treat it as null and void, and we just start fresh. Another angle to it.
But see, do you think that's a guarantee that when Arsenal comes back in the new season, do you see all these players re-signing and Arsenal being able to sign new players without that added benefit of having that Champions League or the Europa League money? Do you see Arsenal coming back stronger with the cancellation?
Yeah, I think if so, like obviously there's things like player contracts which will have to be resolved in the light of all this thing that happened. Assuming everyone stays, and we also have a transfer budget to bring in a few more players, strengthen our defense. Mm-hmm. I feel like the way Arteta has started off his managerial career at Arsenal, he had kind of put the team on the right track. We were conceding much more fewer goals. Mm-hmm. And that was really kind of putting us on the right path till this entire thing happened. Mm-hmm. So I feel like under his guidance and with like a new fresh start to a new league season, I think we would definitely be in the mix. Maybe not for the title, but at least for the top 4.
In cancellation, right? So on that note, Thomas, as a Red Devil, what are your thoughts of how the season should progress?
Obviously, my first preference would be cancellation as a United fan because then Liverpool don't win the league.
Right.
And I think nothing would be funnier and better to a United fan than that.
Yeah.
But besides that, I think the fair way to go ahead would be suspension. Mm-hmm. I think for a number of different reasons. Actually, UEFA just came out and they said that if any of the European leagues cancel their seasons or abandon their seasons, their teams automatically disqualify for the Champions League.
Right.
So that being said, I don't think cancellation is the way to go, because then that automatically means that your top four teams don't play in the Champions League. Other like fifth and sixth don't play in the Europa League
Right.
either. The other thing is there's a huge financial loss if you cancel the season right now. If you decide to just suspend the season, you still have games to play. Games will still be televised.
Right.
So you still bring in a huge amount of revenue for the teams in terms of match day sales and in terms of just their TV broadcasting as well, the face that they get. So I think if you don't have that, it's such a huge loss for the teams.
Yeah.
I think it takes a huge hit on their financial health. It results in unemployment within the teams itself, and I think there's just a ripple effect financially within the entire league that could send all of it crashing down.
It carries on. I think it carries on into the next season as well, and I think the whole league faces it,
Yeah.
especially with the broadcast revenue that they lose out on.
Yeah, and actually the third point that I didn't even really think about until you mentioned it, I think the player contracts is a very important point why you should suspend and not cancel.
Right.
Because if you had to cancel the league, how are you going to renegotiate all of those contracts? That means a lot of players whose contracts are expiring right now, they're not going to play next season for you. And how are you going to renegotiate all of those different contracts? So you might as well suspend the league. You might as well suspend the league, and then
And
you can
negotiate in the back
and
as
then
well,
and
yeah.
then you can continue with negotiations as you go
Right.
forward.
Right. Yeah, good point about the negotiations of contracts, which brings me to the other point, which is what happens to teams that are relegation or promotion bound? What happens to the bottom three in the Premier League or the top three in the Championship and all the leagues that come beneath it? So what are your thoughts on how cancellation affects them? Is it fair to those teams who have played 30-some games in the Championship or League One, League Two to now go back to the drawing board and start all over again?
Yeah, so like I guess let's look at currently where things stand from the league. You have Aston Villa, you have West Ham, you have Watford, and you have Bournemouth, all kind of separated by around somewhere between 2 and 5 points, fighting it out for relegation. If the league was to maybe get suspended, those teams, like you said, it probably would be fair because they actually get to battle it out. Cancellation would actually work out very great for those teams because the same teams which got promoted from the Championship last year would feel that, okay, you know what, we've had a bad season so far. We get to start from scratch and maybe even possibly look at this same point in the season being somewhere like 10th. If the season was to start fresh in, say, next August. Where I think it will be a little unfair is to the teams who are currently in the Championship trying to fight their way into the Premier League. Because we need to keep in mind that those relegation spots, the bottom three, read something interesting about like just the fact that the amount of TV revenue those guys get by staying in the Premier League is somewhere around like 95 to 100 million pounds.
Right.
Just by virtue of being in that spot. So someone like Leeds United and West Brom, who are currently fighting to get into the Premier League, they want a share of that pie as well. And they will stand to lose out by this whole scenario happening. So it's kind of tough to say that like the people who are aiming to get into it will be probably unfair for them. But for the teams who are currently in this position and have a huge financial loss if they were to drop out, cancellation would also work well for them. So again, there's no like there's winners or losers. Again, from our individual team's perspective, we can think that like for me, obviously cancellation works. For the relegation teams, I can't really say much, but yeah, I don't know. Like, what's your thoughts?
Yeah,
on
like
the
what's
whole thing?
I'm so again just rephrasing the question as what would your thoughts be if let's say United were in one of those relegation spots? Would you want cancellation so you can go back to the drawing board, or would you want suspension where you know that you probably need to win 6 out of the next 10 games, and it might not happen? So where do you see yourself as putting your team in that spot?
I mean, if I had to put United in that spot, I mean, in that hypothetical situation where they're in a relegation spot, then I would want the league to be cancelled. But again, it would be a very selfish decision.
Yeah.
I think as it stands with United even being placed where they are, I still think it's unfair almost to United to basically say, you know what, scrap all of this. United are only 3 points away from a Champions League spot right now. I think even given a situation where the league resumes,
Yeah.
and you have these many games going forward, they're on a good run of form as well. I think United will be able to catch up and secure a Champions League spot. If you cancel, that means United go back to being in the same position of having to play Europa League positions and then having to play again in the Europa League, like in the season going forward, which I don't think is fair. The other thing is, and I'm taking myself away from just being a United fan right now. It's very, very unfair to other teams. Liverpool, as much as I hate to say it, like obviously they deserve, if they've played this well, they've gone on this kind of a run, they deserve to actually win the league. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to say it, but it's true. The other teams that also would really be like fucked over by something like this is someone like Sheffield. If you cancel the league now, they've gone in like 29 games. They've had like the season of their lives. I don't think they'll ever be able to replicate something like this. And you're basically saying all of this is null and void.
Yeah.
And even in addition to that, more than like Sheffield and these guys who've overachieved, you have so many individual records that have taken place this season. Like, so Liverpool's like run is one of them, but even smaller player records, like the number of goals scored. Like Aguero scored, I think he scored another hat-trick recently, which made him the highest number of hat-tricks by any player in the league. And if you nullify the league, that record gets taken away from him as well, which I think becomes very unfair to players and to the entire team.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. But speaking about the European leagues and the impact of UEFA announcing that teams or leagues that cancel face the scrutiny of not being able to participate in Champions League or Europa League. So how do you see the Premier League going forward participating in the Europa League or the Champions League in a scenario where, let's say, the Champions League wants to resume in June, but the Premier League is not able to kind of resume by August, September, and there's that lag of a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and also keeping in mind that Spain and Italy might not have any more football for at least this year, it seems. So where do you see the European competitions going this year?
Yeah, so I think the only way to make that feasible is for UEFA to work along with the individual football associations, the different leagues, predominantly obviously the top 5 leagues because that concerns the Champions League. But then for the Europa League, you have all the smaller ones, including Belarusian League featuring sluts. But keeping all those teams in mind, UEFA needs to work in tandem with all these different associations to come up with a feasible date where they don't screw someone over in terms of, like, someone who's actually earned their right to be in that competition should still be able to participate. That would actually have to be worked out between UEFA and the individual leagues. As far as the Premier League is concerned, again, I'll just bring it back to the Arsenal discussion. We stood to lose about £50 million by not qualifying for that Champions League. That is a serious loss in revenue for us.
Right.
We would have to make up for all of that by increasing ticket prices, which obviously then hurts the fans.
It's already I think Arsenal already has the most expensive tickets in England
exactly.
right now.
So losing on a $50 million annual revenue is a big hit. And 30 million of that just comes from the TV rights. So like that's another very great way for us to expand our global brand across.
I think the 20 million, that's the rest, comes from the AFTV cooking videos, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's from his pasta,
Robbie's good
and
old
beef
pasta.
videos.
Yeah, pasta and beef.
But I mean,
always helps.
so carrying on from that point, there's also a chance that countries might not even open their borders.
Yeah.
Let's say Germany or Greece or other countries refuse to open borders, even though they're having their own domestic competitions going on.
Yeah.
How does that affect Champions League? How is that still fair for UEFA to go ahead and kind of punish these leagues for not kind of denying the security measures?
Yeah, if you ask me, honestly, I think UEFA is being like just a bunch of assholes right now. They are. I think it's extremely unfair that you like kind of twist all these other leagues arms to basically say that no, you have to play ball with the way we want to do things.
Yeah.
And it's very clear with the way that UEFA has run, this is basically a money grab for them. They know it's a huge financial loss.
Like, not only is it unethical, it's also immoral to
It's immoral.
put players' safety at risk, right?
And even the fans, like, why would you put like the fans at risk by like opening this up?
Yeah.
Even if you just bring the players in, like the safety in terms of them like contracting it potentially, but then also just in terms of injuries, you can't expect a player to just get up and then just get into a game and then start to play 3-4 games a week in a little contracted schedule.
The league is still there. The FA Cup is going on. There's the Europa League and the Champions League. So that's realistically probably 15 to 20 games for a team involved in a couple of competitions over a span of like 2 months maybe.
Yeah.
So that does bring in the threat of injuries
For sure.
a lot. So, kind of wrapping up this whole conversation. It was a great conversation. Some very good and very valid points by both of you. So, final thoughts. 30 seconds, George. Where do you see the league going here on?
I would say again, like in terms of like coming back to my old point, cancellation I think is the best way to go. Just it wouldn't be offensive to anyone. Obviously, Liverpool fans would be very pissed that this happens, but looking at the larger picture, being fair to everyone, cancellation is the best way to go. And also from just like a scheduling point, it would be insane to push the league into August and then push the other league, because you have the Olympics and the Euros starting in 2021.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about that? Like, we haven't figured all that out. So from the short-term perspective, keep things simple, cancel it now, start fresh in August.
Good. Thomas?
I think the exact opposite, man. I think you are going to offend a lot of people if you decide to cancel the league. Number one being Liverpool, number two being all the teams in like competition for the Champions League spots, because there's only like 3 points between all of them.
Yeah.
And everyone in the relegation zone as well. You're going to piss off a lot of people if you just completely cancel it, and at least for those people who have a very realistic shot of getting into those positions. I also think, like, just in general, like if you decide to cancel, it throws everything into a bit of a mess then. I think what you can do is suspend and start to push everything a little forward.
Right.
Like, none of these things are set in stone. You can always suspend, play these matches, make sure it's a fair result for all the teams that are involved, and then move these leagues into future dates and reschedule everything else. It's an unprecedented scenario, but it also calls for a situation where you can do unprecedented things as well.
Right.
So I think just move the thing along, basically.
So, a great discussion. And on that point, let's call it a wrap. It was good having you, George. It was good having you, Thomas.
It was a pleasure, man.
Yeah, it's always.
Sluts specialize in pleasure, so I would know, and hopefully you would know as well. Wink, wink.
Big Papa Pump.
Yeah, big power pump. So that's a wrap for us. That's a wrap for Halftime Roomies. Stay safe, stay home, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.
Peace.